Welcome to In Phase, In Tune with Autism, the podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Email. Together, we're shifting away from old paradigms and stepping into a new way of thinking when it comes to relating to the non-speaking autistic population. One that presumes competence in the intellect, acknowledges the brain-body disconnect, and honors the profound spiritual roles that these individuals may be playing in our rising consciousness as a human race. It's time to connect with our intuition and get truly in phase. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome to the In Phase, In Tune with Autism, the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Eileen Email, and I'm the host, and I work with non-speaking autistics with apraxia, and I work with training purposeful movement, utilizing the letter boards, and working with regulating the nervous system as well. I also coach the parents with things like that. So this is my husband, Blake, and he's a chiropractor, and I'll be asking him some questions today because when it comes to best serving my clients and what I want to see in the future for this community and what I've seen in my experience, I've been doing this under this presuming competence lens and trying to understand the brain-body disconnect. I've been doing this and working with this population under that lens since like 2017, 2018. I've worked with this population before that, but it wasn't until 2017, 2018 where I realized that the focus needed to be around not teaching them necessarily education-wise as if they couldn't understand, because the comprehension is there. What we're realizing is anything that we can do to help the body function better, help the brain become neuroplastic and move towards things that we want to see in the body to function better, that's where we should be putting our energy. And so it definitely piques my interest, the things that seem to work to help increase that brain-body connection. So I'll be asking Blake a few questions around this today, and we'll see where the conversation goes. What we're seeing displayed by non-speaking autistics with apraxia. The reason why they're usually unable to talk or unable to speak reliably and a lot of time purposefully is because the motor system piece isn't connected as a neurotypical person's is. So what I'm interested in is talking about why are we even looking at this piece of integrating primitive reflexes? First, can you tell me what is a primitive reflex and why would it be beneficial for a parent to look into this type of thing for their child? Just give me the lowdown.
So primitive reflexes, they're early patterns of movement that are there in developing infants, babies, fetuses, etc.
So primitive reflexes, early patterns of movement. So these are actual reflexes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about a reflex, like if you like tap your knee and your leg kicks, like that's a deep tendon reflex. But when we're very young babies, we have other kinds of motions that are stimulated by similar things. So again, the knee extension
so like
sort of
hitting
reflex
the
is
knee.
hitting the knee. But in a baby, for example, you might have like startle reflex that's triggered by like loud noises or feeling like they're about to fall. And then you got that could be moral reflex, startle reflex. Call different things, but ultimately all these different primitive reflexes are just early patterns of motion that are elicited with certain stimuli, like loud noises or moving in a certain direction or pressure in a certain area. For example, like rooting reflex, like brush here, baby will turn their head towards that.
So like brush on the face, and then the baby should reflexively turn and open their mouth.
Now, again, that's the piece, the reflexively. What makes it a reflex is that these aren't conscious decisions. These aren't ways of moving in response to something because you decided to do that. It's just the way that things are connected in the nervous system so far. At this stage of development, these are the conditioned or the patterns that the body's going to move to with these stimuli.
So these are things that everybody should be born with, basically for survival. It's like the root reflex is obviously so you can eat.
Yeah.
And then the startled reflex is so you can pay attention to what's going on in your environment to keep you safe type thing, to respond.
Yeah, sure. I think the important thing to think about with it, though, is that these are ways of interacting in the world before your nervous system is developed enough for you to consciously.
Okay, so ways of interacting in the world. Yeah, like before basically like personality patterns come online and more like complex movements.
Yeah. Now, not all the primitive reflexes are there once you're born,
Okay.
and not all of them go away at the same time. It just
Mm-hmm.
depends on like what stage of development you are, what type of things you've been challenged with in your life. When I say challenge, I don't mean necessarily difficulties. I just mean things that you encountered.
Things that you
Like
encountered in your
you'll, yeah.
experience.
So, for example, there's like a reflex where if you push on the baby's foot, they'll push back. You
Right.
know, that's just a conditioned pattern. That's what they're gonna do anytime you do that, and that should go away at some point. But it'll go away once the nervous system is strong enough to replace that reflex with something that's more conscious. You know?
Okay, so I'm just like asking questions to kind of get clear and clarify, understand at some level what we're talking about. So we're born, we have these reflexes that should be there. And once they're elicited enough times, so if you're pushing the baby's foot and the reflex of them pushing back is elicited enough times, eventually it'll be what's called integrated and it'll go away.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, it's likely way more
It's way more
complicated than that.
complex than
And
that.
I just want to be honest. Like, I'm not the authority on primitive reflexes, but the way I understand it for the organization of the nervous system, it's the same as any kind of like motor pattern that you're gonna do. You know, like if
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to learn a new skill, the more you do it, obviously, the better you get at it.
Okay.
But these primitive reflexes are serving as a primitive way to move and interact in the world until our nervous system is strong enough to do other things.
Oh, right. And so, why do they say this treatment is like one of the best things that you can do for an apraxic body or a non speaker who has an apraxic body? Why is this helpful?
So the way that I see it is that if you have a primitive reflex that's still there beyond the point that it should be there, so if a
Mm-hmm.
reflex is supposed to go away when you're 1 year old and you're older and it's still there, or
Mm-hmm.
remnants of it are still there, really
He's
what
good.
it's doing is it's reflecting an area where the nervous system isn't fully developed or isn't fully matured. So that'll serve as like a bottleneck in the way that the body and nervous system works.
Okay, can I ask you this?
Yeah.
So, why wouldn't those reflexes be integrated, or why wouldn't they become mature enough to be integrated? Like, do you know?
I mean, I'm sure there's many different reasons. There's probably like pathological reasons potentially,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be a matter. I mean, if we're talking about the autistic population, the way that the nervous system is organized is just not the same than like a typical developing person for a
Right.
number of different reasons, I'm sure.
Right.
You know?
So it kind of doesn't matter why, because that would depend on an individual
Yeah, I
basis.
think it's
And
probably many things and many
Mhm.
reasons, and many that I certainly don't know, and I'm sure that are not known. But at the most like lowest level, I would think it's because it hasn't been challenged enough.
It hasn't been challenged enough, and it
I
hasn't
think
been
that
enough.
could be one
Okay, that could be
that I
one.
could see.
So let's say non-speaking autistic who's apraxic, they start going to this treatment. The treatment plan is to elicit a certain set of primitive reflexes. What is the idea behind it? Like, why are we doing that? And what is the benefit we would see?
So I mentioned a second ago that a latent primitive reflex, so one that's still there,
A
that past
latent primitive
is so
reflex.
a primitive reflex that's still there past the point it should have already been integrated.
Okay.
If it's still there, again, it's pointed to an area where almost like the nervous system is unorganized there, right?
Mm-hmm.
We should have conscious control over this motor pattern,
Mm-hmm.
but this reflex is still presenting.
Right. So that means like you can't progress past it, basically.
Kind of. I
Or
mean,
maybe like the brain can't connect to more than
yeah.
that. It's just like disorganized.
It's not that there's so many different ways to talk about it with words,
Mm-hmm.
but just to speak generally with it, if, for example, a common one might be like asymmetric tonic neck reflex where you turn and then the opposite arm
Can
bends,
you
that sort of
explain
thing.
if people are just listening on audio what you just did with your head?
I turn my head to the side and then just bend my arm a little bit.
Uh-huh.
If I don't think I'm gonna be able to go into all like the individual reflexes. I'm just bringing them up as examples.
Okay.
So I think anybody who's listening, look up primitive reflexes. Find
Mm-hmm.
like short lists. There's a ton of videos of things online, so you can get a visual of what this is. But for example, with that one, the motor pattern isn't. I would say it's not even really beneficial. I would say like talk about rooting
Right.
reflex. Like if you brush here and baby can put their head and mouth closer to like a source of food, that's going to be helpful. You know.
Rooting.
But like the asymmetric tonic neck reflex, and of course there could be things I don't know here, but if we turn and bend the opposite arm, that doesn't immediately come up as something that's like super beneficial.
Yeah.
But if something like that is still there, obviously this person can still use their head and neck, can still turn, can still bend and straighten the arm. But if something like that is still there, it's going to change how efficiently and how effectively those type of motions might be, and it might get in the way of being able to properly initiate movement with those kind of things. So if you're talking about spelling, a lot of that relies on orienting the head into a certain position. A lot of it relies on holding something, pressing and moving, and doing that on purpose. And if in certain positions our body's defaulting to a reflexive way of movement instead of into a purposeful way of movement, by training or integrating primitive reflexes, you can access more of your purposeful movement throughout your entire nervous system.
Okay, so I have two things. And the first one, I'll just kind of like reflect back and clarify. So, the idea behind integrating these primitive reflexes when we're talking about the non speaking autistic apraxic population is that once you work on integrating these reflexes enough, then the nervous system can become more organized where it would be able to have more access to be able to put down pathways in the brain for a more purposeful way of moving, more purposeful motor patterns.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's also important to say that it's not all about primitive reflexes. You know, that's just something that you can look at and have like a relatively objective measure to say something's going on there. That's something we can work on. But in truth, it's these primitive reflexes probably aren't just about movement either. Like, of course, movements can elicit many of them. Different sensations will elicit certain movements that are involved with the primitive reflex. But the nervous system is a very complex network of things. So many different things are connected. So if you have a latent primitive reflex, which means it's still there when it shouldn't be, that might also interfere with other processes that your body should be doing.
Okay.
I don't want to speculate too much about that, but I know that I remember reading that certain primitive reflexes, if they're still there, they can impact immune system, digestive system, et cetera, you know?
So this isn't just about movement. It's about development of the whole, most likely in general.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
so
because
it's
your nervous system
so
is controlling everything in your body. So
it's
if your entire
yeah.
nervous system is functioning well and properly, everything can function well and
You
properly.
see, this is why this interests me so much because for my clients who I'm working with trying to train purposeful movement patterns and gain access to that, obviously for letterboard reasons to be able to spell and communicate their thoughts and their needs, and obviously for exercise movements, like so they can have healthy bodies and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's like most of the time, the biggest challenge isn't they don't understand what I'm saying. They clearly, especially when they have access to more regulation where they're able to purposely move, they clearly understand what's going on and what I'm saying. Their biggest challenge is having access to purposeful movement and having access to that state of regulation within their nervous system. It's like in a few of my clients what's been trained, and I feel like obviously by no fault it's just the way it is, so I'm trying to be curious about the ways that's going to help them gain that regulation in their body. It feels like they just have trained stressed out states that we have to constantly coach them out of. And the parents will be doing everything. They'll be doing diet, really really well. And so I feel like this is a deeper layer of like, okay, is this the root, or is this one of the roots that we can start to dig up and replant, and it's just so interesting hearing you talk about it because it just feels like it's a puzzle piece that fits in and makes sense, because especially my clients who are so intrinsically motivated and we're so connected, I will, give them, okay, we're working on purposeful movement. Here we go. Here's the first exercise we're going to do. And you will see them try so hard to organize their body, but it comes out like dilapidated. Like it's either not on pace, or it's like way too much force, or maybe not enough force, or maybe it's like a different part of the body that they're moving than I asked them to. And it's just like, I would obviously just so love to give them more ways to be able to work on the things they want to work on. So it feels like it just fits, like that disorganized piece. It's like, okay, their brain power's here, their will's here, they're with me, but like when they try, it just comes out differently, and that's what we work on, and they definitely get better at it. I talked to you about this before, like me and you doing like a experimental like trial situation, because you know about this stuff and you've studied this stuff being a chiropractor, but we've never actually put it into practice. What would it look like, the assessment piece, to know what to assess and like how the assessment would go, and then what kind of things would we put in place? Like, can you just like make up a scenario?
Well, if we're talking about like primitive reflexes, obviously you'd want to test primitive reflex.
Okay, but like educate me.
Yeah, but what do you want
Okay,
to know?
so how do you test primitive reflexes?
Ultimately, it comes down to knowing the test primitive reflex, testing it, seeing if it elicits a response, and then if it does, you work on it. You know,
So
you
if it
do it.
elicits a response,
Yeah.
so you're looking for like a specific response though,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And do you mean sometimes these responses are more like halfway for people? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you think of a gross motor one? Is there a gross motor one, like falling back or something like that?
Some of these are elicited with sensation. So like there's a spinal galant reflex. You just like brush up the back and you'll like bend, or the muscle will twitch, something like that. But some of them are elicited by a certain movement. You know, there's ones like symmetric tonic neck reflex, like looking up or down will change what the legs are doing. I'm speaking generally about these though, because I don't want to get into the specifics of individual reflexes. But those feel like kind of gross motor ones, especially the head neck motion ones. So that's asymmetric tonic neck reflex, symmetric tonic neck reflex. Those are both related to movement of the head in different ways, and different things that might do to the arms. There's many different ways to test these different things. So you'd want to find what way works best for your kid or the person that you're working with.
Right. And it definitely has to be, kid and tester on the same page, and it's a comfortable situation.
Yeah. And again, I haven't done this enough with people, especially not non-speaking.
Yeah, that's
people,
what I'm
to be
curious
able to
about,
fully
though.
employ it. So that, I mean, I think it would come down to like a parent at home would like might hear this and be interested in doing this. I mean, I'll look up a video on how to do these things.
Right.
And some of them are relatively easy to do, but again, a lot of it depends on how.
So can I ask you, is there like a trillion of them? Like how many?
I think there are many. I know in Dr. Malillo's book, Disconnected Kids, he lists 10.
He lists 10.
Those are the ones
so you like start off with like 10 of. Okay.
Yeah.
And so basically you test them, you see what kind of response you get. And if you're getting the full on response, so that means the primitive reflex is still there.
Yeah. So it's still active, but you may or may not get a full response. You may just get like a very small piece of it. You may get like a muscle twitch.
And then from then on, you do exercises basically to elicit and practice integrating.
Yeah, because ultimately it's going to go away the stronger the nervous system that's involved with those motions gets. So you pretty much do those, and then they can eventually go away. There's many different like techniques of getting rid of primitive reflexes though and integrating them. That'll incorporate other kind of exercises with that. So again, there's probably many different ways to do it, but ultimately it comes down to engaging the nervous system where it's weak so it can get stronger. So it can get stronger. And this is of interest to this population because many of the challenges stem from that. The challenges are not necessarily stemming from primitive reflexes, but primitive reflexes are showing us that the nervous system isn't up to where it should be. And that'll reflect an interference with the way that things naturally work. It's not giving like the strongest support for like what you'd want for development. So like that's why this is an area of interest. And I'm saying that the nervous system always isn't strong enough here. It could just be that the pathway that's easier and like still online is the reflex pathway. The nervous system is probably totally capable of doing whatever it is. It's a matter of switching from the reflexes being default to switching to whatever you actually intend to do as being the default. But in order to do that, you have to repetitively engage that like new pathway. You know what I mean? Right. This is so interesting to me because some of the people that I work with, it feels as though all they have access to a lot of times is impulses and reflexes. But it's interesting to me too because it wasn't always this way. I mean, they've always had apraxia and trouble with purposeful movement, and purposeful movement has always been very inconsistent. But it's like this time came in their life where it's like, we see a lot of OCD showing up. We see a lot of aggression showing up. And, they've done a lot of
a lot of different things to try to help. And latest, we're seeing that they have PANS. And so, can you talk about how something like PANS would show up in the person as all of these different, like very loudly, like, oh, I see the reflexes going off, like I see, like with the body like being in the state of irritation or whatever, like why is it showing up so much? Like all I have access to is these reflexes and these impulses, and OCD is excessive. Like, can you explain that?
No, I really can't.
Yeah.
No, I can't really speak on pants. I don't know nearly enough about it.
Okay. I don't know anything about it either. I just know that like when the body isn't feeling well, or it's a more stressed out state.
Yeah. I mean, that
So
makes sense to me. I think in order for things to work in its like kind of ideal state, you need to have access to all of your resources, you know? But if things are stressed out, if there is stress, you won't be able to do that. You're going to switch more to that fight or flight state.
that's what
You
I
know?
was trying to
That
get to. Like,
survival
I
state,
feel
you
like
know?
what happens is like, and those are the families that I feel like are hurting the most
Yeah.
because they feel like they're at a dead end. Like, because you've already had this whole time like the apraxia and everything, and so things have been challenging enough. Then it's like, okay, now we have this PANS going on, and what I see is that high fight or flight state is very hard to get out of.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get out of. And what's showing up, presenting in the body, is a lot of this impulsive, reflexive stuff. And this is in typical kids too. Like, I've seen this online in typical kids where like they become highly compulsive when they have hands and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I wonder what else is really involved with that. I don't know though. You know, like what other things are being impacted like that? I imagine there's probably like an immune system activation going on with something
Right.
like that. But I don't know. I'm not
I don't know.
educated enough on that.
Yeah, all I know is having access to regulation is so, so important because I see it every single week with each one of my clients, even the ones who they present very calm and down regulated. Like, they still, the way they do their best work is whenever they're in a state of regulation and a like healthy activation of purposeful motor in the body. And what I'm noticing is it's a state. It's a state.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see it very clearly in my ones who present more impulsive. And basically it's like their body has, some of them, their body can have like addictions to certain things. And so if they're not getting certain things in their body, again, this gets to a person inside and body is completely different. So the body has at some point gotten so reinforced or whatever, or used to a certain stimulus in the environment, becomes addicted to it, and then the body will get dysregulated if they don't have it. Okay. So what I'm working is, I see like all the time, I'm coaching people out of dysregulation for whatever reason it is. And I can see the state that they get into that is more regulated. And it's like, okay, boom, now I can type. Now I can do the purposeful movement stuff. And a lot of times, purposeful movement training with just like small paced movements, like clapping hands or doing cross body movements, that becomes their cue to then put their body into this more regulated state. So it's a lot of work though. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of work on my part and my regulation. It takes a lot of work on the individual's part of being so committed. What I want to know is like the things that are going to help them get to these states more easily, and why it's so hard for them to get into these states.
You know, what I think is important in relation to all that is having some idea about how the nervous system is organized. Because you talk a lot about purposeful movement. To me, that means moving on purpose, meaning that you're conscious, you're aware of what you're doing, and what you're doing and what you're engaging with. You're doing that because you decided to do that. But only like a very small part of your nervous system is actually conscious like that.
Whoa.
And actually aware, where you can actually do purposeful movement. So if you think about your brain, like if you look at a picture of a brain, you'll see all the little curves and squiggles. That's the outside covering of the brain. That's the cortex. That's the only part of your brain that is conscious and able to engage in purposeful, aware things for both motion and for sensation. So there's many things that you feel and perceive. If you feel it and you know you feel it, that's part of your conscious. That's all the way up at the cortex. But you can also feel and perceive things that you're not consciously aware of. This happens all the time in all of the blood vessels of your body, your digestive system. Things are moving there. You're sensing things. You're aware of things, but you're not consciously aware of them. So that's not happening at the level of the cortex on the outside of the brain.
It's not happening at the level of conscious awareness.
So below that, I mean, there's multiple different levels inside the brain, but if it's not at the cortex, you're not consciously aware of. It's all like the back office stuff of your brain coordinating motion with whatever. So when you talk about the brain-body disconnect, even just from the level of the nervous system, not talking about other ideas about what consciousness is, but just from the nervous system point of view, to the level that it's understood, your conscious awareness is just that outside part of your brain, you know? Where your body, there's still many motions that you can do. If you do something, even like a highly complicated skill, like driving is like the classic example, you can do it once you're good enough at it below the level of conscious awareness.
Right.
That's where like your cerebellum in the back takes over, where you have a ton of connections. It's also an area of the brain that I believe they show a lot of different kind of activity and connections in the autistic population versus neurotypical populations.
Right.
And that's where your muscle memory comes into play. That's where your just patterns of motion that you're very, very used to doing.
Can I ask you this? If we're looking through the lens of the primitive reflexes not being integrated, and therefore more mature motor patterns that are more orderly can't develop.
Yeah.
Do you think it makes sense to say that with a non-speaking autistic person, you know, like you talked about the conscious part of the brain, and even for typical people, like things that we are perceiving that are in conscious awareness, but then underneath it, all this stuff is going on. All these motor patterns, as if you're like driving somewhere, are happening under conscious awareness. Would you say that's for someone with apraxia who maybe hasn't integrated these reflexes, that all these things that are going on below their conscious awareness are these disorderly or conditioned, you know, so happen to be conditioned patterns of movement? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know like the neurology of specific like primitive reflexes, but I know there's classic examples for like a deep tendon reflex, like tapping on the knee and it kicking. It goes up to the spinal cord and then it goes back down to the leg. So it doesn't even reach the brain, those kind of reflexes. Is that what you're asking? Like
So
a primitive reflex
I'm
would
kind of
stop
asking,
before
like,
the
as a
conscious
typical
level?
person and working with this population so deeply and really trying to understand, what I've realized in myself is like, holy crap, there's all these responses and things that I have and that I do that are not really under my control. Like, and I can give so many examples. I mean, if I'm nervous, maybe words won't come out in the right way. Or if I'm trying to change my diet, and I can't just do it by will, like some other thing has to change. So that's how it is for like a typical person. But it's like for an apraxic autistic person, it's almost like these more obvious patterns of like movement. It's kind of hard to explain what I'm getting in my mind. It's like they have their conscious awareness, but like all these things, like one of my clients will just loop around the house. They'll loop around the house, they'll OCD a lot. And it's like I have to be the one to like intervene and engage their what I call conscious motor to be able to have them come and sit. And they do so willingly, but it's like he would loop around the house for the rest of the day if I wouldn't intervene. So it's like these conditioned patterns that are happening under his conscious awareness that he's not able to control. Almost in a way where I feel like I'm recognizing that I'm not able to control some patterns as well. But obviously for me, it comes out more looking purposeful or looking more developed. For them, it's more what you would call like underdeveloped motor patterns. Is that making sense? I feel like it's very complex.
I think, are you asking specifically about like OCD patterns?
Not necessarily. It could just be like conditioned patterns of gross motor, you know? It doesn't have to be compulsive.
Yeah.
I see it in all my clients.
What I'm thinking about, I remember one time we were supposed to go to our daughter's school in the morning, and I got in my truck and I left early to go, earlier than I would normally go to work. And
you
I
went all
got
the way
I
to
got
work.
all the way to work, and I was like, what am I doing? I have to go.
You were supposed to go to her school, and you
Yeah.
accidentally went all the way to work.
Yeah. So I was unconscious.
Under your
of it.
conscious
Yeah, I
awareness.
just wasn't.
There was nothing purposeful to step in and be like, "Hey,
I
you're
remember.
supposed to go to your
I
daughter's
remember.
school."
I was talking to myself in my truck on the way, and so I spaced on. I'm doing something different this time, and instead I just did the same thing that I do all the time.
So it's almost like, you know, we see these things in ourselves in a different way, and so we can see it in the autistic population as well, but it's like obviously in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, you can think anytime too. It's like, oh, I want to do this thing, and then you go to the room to do it, But when you go to the room, you do whatever you normally do in that room, and you forget to do whatever you meant to do.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm.
Like, I remember one time I went to the bathroom to wash my hands, and I brushed my teeth instead.
Or what you did.
And I came back with minty fresh breath, but dirty hands, and I was like, "What did I do? How did I do that?" Because
Right.
brushing my teeth was way more complicated than
I
washing
feel
my
like
hands.
you are always operating on autopilot. Like you've done a lot of weird things. I think what we're trying to
But
explain
I
is
think
like,
the reason that that happened to me in both of those cases is that my conscious mind, I was thinking about other things. I was using my
mm,
conscious mind for something else, so my unconscious patterns took over.
right. And
Even
so
though
what I think might be happening a lot of times with these non-speaking autistic people presenting, their outside body motor in some way, what's going on the inside is one, they might just be thinking of other things while their body's like playing out on autopilot. Or if you're engaging with them, I believe that they're 100% listening and they're with you, but their body is completely on like a different like plane.
yeah.
And so what you're trying to do is connect the two. And I have a really good example of like I'm like, oh, okay, yes, this is it. This is it. Like really connecting the dots for me. So one of my clients, he for years and years and years, because parents were not aware yet and they're still just learning about presuming competence and they're learning about mind body disconnect. His body has always had and wanting a phone all the time. I know everybody can understand that. And one day I didn't bring my phone to the session and he went through a lot of dysregulation and not being able to just like hold my phone and see my phone. And so what I did was I call it pattern interrupt. I'm like, okay, we're pattern interrupting. I see that you're dysregulated. I'm going to help you put cues in for regulation, for purposeful movement. So we're doing breathing, we're doing gross motor, purposeful movement. We did that for like most of the entire session while he was gasping for air at the top of his lungs, like screaming almost. But he was still doing the movement. And I didn't have to force him in any which way. He's by his will doing all the movements. And he calmed down by the end. And I asked him, okay, like, what do you think about the movements and all today? And blah, 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 blah. And he typed out, I nailed it. Like he's like, I did it. And so what's going on is he's consciously aware, but his body's running away,
Yeah.
doing whatever it's been conditioned to do, and it's getting elicited all the dysregulation. But he was still with me, went through all the purposeful movement, and that's what made me be like, yeah. I mean, these sorts of things happen all the time. Because if you're an outsider looking in, you'll be like, oh my god, the poor kid is like suffering. Like, give him a break. But he didn't want a break because I told him multiple times, we can take a break. But he stayed right there in the chair. He even he went up and he closed the door like, no, I'm staying in here and I'm doing this. And another one is one of my clients, I'm just going to say real quick, mentioned that he said that was a roller coaster. Like he's on a roller coaster. So basically, I'm trying to bring him down to regulation. His body's doing all this stuff. He's just along for the ride almost. So like to really encourage parents to presume competence, understand mind and body are two different things. And yeah, anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think what stands out to me with that is that you just got to remember that it's stressful to learn new things.
Yeah.
So when you talk about sometimes you working with the kid, if you like increase the number of sessions that you're doing, or if you're doing it longer, more consistently than you have, you might see some of their behaviors come back a good bit more. It's because it's stressful to learn these new patterns, to do these things, to do it repetitively to get stronger.
Right.
Same thing, working out is stressful. That's why you're sore afterwards. But that process of just learning something new is stressful. It's also extremely stressful. I would say maybe even more to change patterns that you've already done. You're learning something new and you're not doing something that you've relied on for like stability in your life before, you know? So in that scenario where you're working with this kid without a phone, it was hard, it was stressful. He expressed that in many ways, his body expressed that in many ways, but he still did good because ultimately you want to do that. I remember whenever learn to drive, today's world, we all learn on automatic transmissions, And then I remember I got that stick vehicle that one time, and I was excited about it. It was fun because I was like, ooh, something new. But now all of a sudden, what was automatic for me driving before, it was like, no, I have to pay attention every time I change gears. Literally something I never had to think about before, And then now I have to worry about like stalling out if I stop from an incline, and start back up. So it was way more stressful to drive that way, but it was still like fun and I wanted to, but like it took a long time before it was like back to automatic, back to not having to think about what to do while
easier.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a flare up when you start working on these patterns that have been there for a long period of time, even if it's in the person's best interest, nervous system development for the long run, to start to make some of those changes.
100%, 100%. And that's really my job. Like, my job is to have trust that the person who is inside this body, who is experiencing all these challenges with moving purposefully, that they want to do this and that they're with me. And I have to believe that they can do it. And that's been a big thing. Like, me just assuming they can do this and me expressing out loud, hey, I believe in you, even when they're crying and hey, I believe in you. I believe you can do this. You can go take a break. And I'm speaking just like this. You can go take a break if you want to, but if you don't want to, you can stay here and I'm here with you and we're going to pattern interrupt. And so what you're doing is basically, for your metaphor, like they're the driver of their body and they're learning a new pattern that they want to do, it's like, oh, you're seeing me as like a 15-year-old instead of like a 3-year-old who needs the phone, and you're helping train my body to reflect that more. Because even though he was crying at the top of his lungs and hyperventilating almost, he was also doing everything I said and doing every single exercise full body. But I think what first has to come is like that trust that that is the situation. And that's where the capital T trust comes in. And that's like sometimes the hardest roadblock. But you have to really sit in the seat and your thoughts and your words towards them of like, this is the actual situation that's going on. Because when you start doubting it, they feel that, and like that will be fight or flight mode. Because that's the difference between him going up and closing the door and being like, no, I'm doing this for the whole session, or his body taking over and him eloping. Like, that's the difference. Yeah. Anyways, we got a little bit not off topic, but adjacent topic, but just what I realize in myself and from what I've seen online, because my whole feed is about autism. And over the years, one of the things that I gut knowing felt like I know that this is one of the things that is going to support the system of somebody who's autistic with apraxia. And one of those things stuck out to me was the integrating primitive reflexes. So that's why we're having this conversation today.
And again, I think the primitive reflexes, if it's there and if you can see it, it's a pretty good indication about when it's there and when it's not there, But there's definitely other nervous system imbalances that you can work on, not only from a motor standpoint, but from a sensory standpoint too. That if you can get those working better, it'll also free up a lot more ability to function better, more purposefully.
You get into that more, what that is? Of like what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily thinking about a specific thing. I'm still thinking about the organization of the nervous system. So we talked about like top versus bottom, basically, where top is conscious, bottom unconscious.
Right.
You also got of the brain and nervous system, but you also got like front to back, where the front of your nervous system is more motor and the back is more like sensory.
Okay, so front more motor, back more sensory.
Yeah. And then of course you got left and right. Where you want these things to be in balance. Of course, there's the talk about left brain versus right brain and what kind of characteristics come with that. Left being more logical, right being more like artistic, creative, stuff like that. And that's what Dr. Melillo talks a lot about in his books and in his topics and whatnot. So that's always good to get into. But I think like if you're like looking for, okay, well, what can I do? What can I work with? I think if you look at just normal development for neurotypical kids, there's all the apps that look at the milestones, the different leaps, different things to present to your kid to give them a varied experience, and that's going to be true for everybody, regardless of kind of where you're at, So like when I'm working with kids, I want to look at, is your movement symmetrical? I'm always asking parents, like, where you position them, is it close to things that they really like over here, things that they don't like over here? I can even see in the rooms when I'm working with babies, there might be posters on this side of the wall or a window on this side of the wall, and they'll gravitate one side to the other, you know what I mean? Or if I notice they have a movement pattern that's over here all the time, I'm asking mom, hey, start to put your voice over here, feed them on
See
this
if they
side,
will,
just to
right.
encourage that
So like
balance more.
feeding basically where you feel the deficiency is, or like the inhibition.
Yeah, and I mean that's the idea of like the sensory diets and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Oh, for
Um,
sure, yeah.
so
And
getting
so,
into all those
yeah.
different ways that you can sense and experience your world, you know?
So what I would want to be intentional about, and we've talked about this before, of you and I like putting something together, is I've always been aware, since the beginning of when I started like ABA back in the day, of like the sensory diet, working alongside the OTs. And what it seemed like to me is like, where are you getting like your information from? And it didn't feel like intentional. It's like, okay, brush. I get the brush. I do. And like intuitively with some of my kids, I feel like I'm like, oh yeah, like they need a good brush on their hands, they need pressure. So what would you say about how to be intentional about the assessment and what you're feeding them?
Yeah. I'll say my thoughts on it are definitely not fully mature.
And that's
Yeah.
why I want to do something like baseline experimental, which
Hmm.
I'm kind of introducing in this podcast,
Yeah.
of like a group of maybe like 5 people. So if you're listening and you're interested in working with us in a way where we can develop more of a learning around these things, definitely message us, because I want to learn, what does it look like for us to be intentional about these assessments, and what kind of, I guess, movement diet to describe, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
feeding the inhibition, and see what kind of results we get, because I'm very interested in this. You're the chiropractor, and so this is a step we can take together. And so that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. I think when it comes to like that idea, where I would start, like if I were to like build something around it, would be looking at all the different kinds of senses that we can get. Because again, I'm still
Mm-hmm.
thinking about front to back part of the nervous system. Knowing that the brain, as like the central computer, is going to take in information, it's going to process that, and then we're going to put information out.
Okay.
So if ultimately we want more functional, purposeful movement,
Mm-hmm.
well, how well are we perceiving? How well are we sensing to be able to appropriately respond to that? You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So I think a good bit of it starts off with the sensation. So you talk about you doing joint compressions with kids and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. There's lots of different things that we've heard about. Many people have likely heard about, like using vibrating things, toothbrushes, stuff like that.
Right.
But also
Well,
any
a lot of
kind of,
people haven't heard of that.
yeah, all these different things and where you apply them is going to stimulate a different part of the brain.
Right.
Uh, Again, I don't want to get like too specific on an individual piece of that whole idea, but I would look at all the different kinds of sensation that you can get. Like if you just talk about touch, there's many different types of touch receptors or perceptions that you can have. Light touch, there's deep pressure, there's
Mm-hmm.
vibration. You can probably talk in this conversation about proprioception, which I think is really big for these kids because or for these people, because if you don't have like a sense of where your body is in space without motion, then you won't be able to initiate movement from here. What you'll have to do first is like kind of move, get that
So
mental map of
this
your
is
body.
something you can grow, though. Like, you believe that you can like grow an awareness of proprioception, right? I mean, I
Yeah, of
definitely
course, yeah.
do, because I'll have clients come to me where it's like in the beginning, it's almost like they're disoriented whenever we're doing full
Hmm.
body movements, but then eventually we're like training that awareness,
Yeah.
So that's what I would want to be more intentional about, because what I do is just like, okay, I go in and I do like full body stuff, but I would like to be like, okay, with your background of
Yeah.
more like, okay, the brain controls this, but
You want to be more targeted with it. You
I
say,
do,
hey,
because I do the
this is the
same thing with
specific kind
everybody.
of sense, this is the specific part of the body that's like deficient. So
Mm-hmm.
let's feed this
Yeah.
part to come in balance with everything else.
Right. I would want to feed each individual child with like what exactly they
Yeah.
need the most. That
Hmm.
way I'm not just relying on what I've always
Yeah.
done. So I'm ready to take a step in that direction.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
it would come down to looking at all the different type of sensory experiences a person could have and finding a way to really identify this one is needed versus this one not so needed, you know?
Yeah.
And then, and the big thing with all the Melillo stuff is left versus right side. He's got
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff in his book about that, about
Mm-hmm.
identifying exactly where from there. But again, there's a lot to potentially look at and talk about and figure out, well, what's important to test versus not.
Right.
Um, but it
Yeah.
can all be done. And for anybody out there who's like interested in that sort of thing, you can also look into, as far in the chiropractic world, functional neurology. Dr. Robert Melillo is big for the autistic community within functional neurology, But there's functional neurologists that are separate and different
Right.
from that go deep into all kinds of different things. There's literally a million things you can do with
So
it.
many things. So
It's
many
very
things.
deep, very complicated, but pretty interesting too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely interested to start working with a hands-on because I want to see, okay, assessment, okay, direct application, okay, do we have results? What did we learn about this person and did this help them, you know?
Yeah. And that's interesting too. It can be hard to fully grasp because just like what we were talking about, learning new things is stressful, and
Mm-hmm.
stress is going to contribute to flare-ups of things. So
Right.
even if you're doing something good, it
Mm-hmm.
might not look fantastic in the
Oh,
beginning.
it most likely
You got to
won't. And I
continue.
feel like that's why we'd make a good team with, obviously in this experimental stage right now, but we make a good team with this because I'm there to be like, presume competence. This is normal that you'd have like a flare up of stress. If you are talking to your child about whatever this is and they're on the same page as you, presume competence.
Yeah.
Because I think when you do that, like I said, they'll be able to show you, yeah, I trust you. I want to do this, and they'll be able to stay with you on the things instead of like eloping every time or
Yeah.
whatever it is, you
And
know?
in the vein of things that we've talked about in the past about developing sensitivity, like to your intuition, and using
Mm-hmm.
that to connect and understand more about what's going on with your kid, that becomes extremely important because then you can get a sense of, okay, well, and what I'm seeing is what my kid doing a reflection of them being overwhelmed and actually overtaxed, or is it one of these like kind of flare ups of stress from learning new things and developing?
Exactly. And we had talked about this, getting sensitive to your intuition, and like you said, one of the last episodes, because that's something that I'm seeing all around with the people that I trust in this community, either parents in this community or practitioners, is that they also believe that we can't just like trust any doctor anymore. You have to be in touch with your intuition of like, this is actually the right direction, because this isn't the normal medical prescription, right? All the things that are coming out that are working for, obviously, we're talking about this population because this is my field. The things that work aren't the things that are just mainstream
Yeah.
prescribed. So, we're on new ground, but I do believe the intuitive piece is very important. It has always been important in my success with all of my clients. And yeah.
And I mean, what you're talking about is the reason that I'm a chiropractor and not some other kind of doctor is because of that philosophy, that understanding. So, if you're not familiar with chiropractic, the fundamental philosophy is that your body's intelligent.
Mm.
Your body knows how to heal. Your body knows how to maintain its proper state. The problem usually is that the world that we're in or things that we're doing interferes with our body's ability to naturally heal, naturally function well. So, the job of somebody like me, a chiropractor, would be to see, well, what's interfering with that, and how do you remove the interference or strengthen the body's capacity to deal with that interference, to heal and function
100%.
well. So when you talk about like trusting a doctor to do a certain thing or say a certain thing, what we want to do is shift more to trusting that intelligence that's inside of you.
100%. And a message of hope, kind of going back to an episode that I just recorded with Sarah Intonato. She is a mother of a non-speaking apraxic autistic, and she's on the letter boards with him. She's a practitioner now, and she talked about this notion of developing her intuition, and that's always given her the right step forward with
Mm,
anything that she's done with her child, and that's the reason why he has the results that he has, where
yeah.
he's speaking in his own IEP meetings because he's regulated enough to
Uh,
type on the boards. According to her, he used to deal with severe OCD and things like that. And so, what I wanted to get back to was what she talked about is so many times in her journey, all these horrible things that were happening to a kid. He woke up with horrible skin rashes and stuff. And she was like, most people are just like, oh, that's just autism. That just happens to people with autism. Like, almost like it's not fixable. It's not
mm,
fixable. It's not helpable because, it is such a struggle and a challenge to figure out what is wrong and how we can help, because they can't speak in the typical way that we communicate, right? So a message of hope is, it's not just like, oh, that's just autism, just deal with it. It's, no, the brain is neuroplastic, regulation can be achieved, safety can be achieved in the body, and whenever those things are put in place, you can move forward in every which way and things get better here and there. But you do have to, I believe, get in touch with that intuitive piece of yourself and do what's right for you and your child. And I do think, just like reiterating that there's hope. So if you find yourself just being conditioned into, oh, well, well, whatever, we'll just do whatever they say, and you don't really feel connected to the solution. It's like finding solutions that do sit right with you and you do feel connected with, just because we've been so conditioned to just take the solution from the doctor, and we're moving out of that. We're definitely moving out of that. I know with myself, I had a situation where I was sick for a very long time. I had a fever for over a year, and it was a high fever. I felt absolutely horrible. It was horrible. The thing that helped heal me and helped get me out of it was not the mainstream thing. It was something that my intuition led me to. So I'm very passionate about this and believe in it 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that's a good wrapping up point. Do you have anything else that was sparked in you?
I don't think so. I think when it comes to all this and everything that I'm talking about and things that I feel like I'm always thinking about is I feel like what needs to happen or what needs to be developed is like a better model of how we think about these kind of things, you know?
Okay.
So I feel like that's the area that I'm talking about with any of this, you know?
Okay, can you explain that?
So like, how do we understand how the nervous system works, what that means, or how does that relate to what you see in yourself and in your family members, things like that, you know? Yeah, a better structure, better model to understand how some of this stuff fits together. Uh, that's the level that I feel like I'm trying to think and speak about when it comes to everything. That I mean,
I think
okay,
it feels pretty vague to me.
it is very vague, and
Like I want to know like what you're talking about.
so. So I talked a little bit about the structure of the nervous system.
Right.
I'm just trying to simplify that map for people.
Okay, you're trying to simplify
Yeah,
it for people.
knowing that breaking things out simply at the front, back, top, bottom, left, right
Yeah.
doesn't really encapsulate everything that's going on here. There's
Mm-hmm.
likely many exceptions within that whole thing, and many things that we don't fully understand with all that too. But having like a little map there just to give us a guide, I think is good and helpful. And recognizing that when we talk about primitive reflexes, and we're talking about in the context of purposeful movement, knowing that it could be related to many other things, you know, I guess more of a holistic map
So a holistic map.
to think about all this. Because you mentioned before too, you know, people are trying lots of different things, trying to think about diet, getting that tuned in and how it relates to everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's related as well, you know?
Right.
But just the map should connect all these things, I feel like.
I definitely believe in the more holistic piece. What I've realized is that when you're truly, truly putting your intention on something and truly like moving forward with it in a way that is sustainable for you, other things improve as well. I will say, as a person who has been completely overwhelmed, whenever I was like very sick, I was so overwhelmed every single day, like my whole body. It's like I couldn't even comprehend what I was doing. Nothing was working correctly. So just trying to like comprehend and understand wasn't even a thing. It was like just do what my intuition is telling me to do because I'm surviving. So I think a lot of people might be in that very challenged survival mode, and it might be like, okay, just rely on your intuition instead of trying to understand all the things, because it can be so overwhelming to people. And I think it might be like your job as a doctor practitioner, like to hold that piece of like, I understand all this information, you know, and I'm gonna help you. Like,
I think you're right. I think that this reminds me of Frozen 2, where it's like, do the next right thing, you know,
just
when you
do
can't see, you know,
right thing.
because it's like, yo, the map isn't clear yet.
I
This is
was
actually
on
uncharted
suffering in that
territory.
darkness.
There is no map for that area. So the way forward is the next right thing. That's back to the trusting intuition.
So true. And this brings it into the spiritual piece for me as well, which the spiritual series is coming. I always mention it on our episodes. But what I've recognized is that when I truly help families, it's when I'm not doubting myself, when I'm not trying to please anybody in any which way, and when I'm like locked into my intuition and into the belief of the child and into the will of wanting to help them, and I'm in my confidence. And it's like, I'm not claiming to know everything, but I do believe in your child, and I believe in what I'm doing, and I believe in myself. And that, I believe, like many times, you know, I think we're all on a journey. Again, this is a spiritual piece. We're all on a journey. We're all here to learn different things and play different roles. And a lot of us are here. We're here to learn how to be in our empowerment and our confidence and in our true faith. And these challenges with these non-speaking autistics and in helping them here in the 3D, we're being faced with choosing that confidence and choosing that empowerment over choosing what's always been conditioned into us, right? That's more spiritual, philosophical piece. But yeah, and that's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
With our teamwork, which I decided to announce on this podcast. Yeah, so I'll put my information in the show notes. I want to work with like 5 to 10 people in this arena of us having a conversation. You and I, you really developing the assessment, and me being the coach on how to provide those assessments. And, you getting the feedback and prescribing how would you say, eliciting the correct movements, I guess. Practicing the correct movements
come up with
under the map that you're talking about.
Just a handful of things that you can do to help support moving in the right direction.
And us putting that application in place and seeing, okay, what kind of results do we get? Is it helpful? Right. So cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
All right, that is our episode for today. Thank you for watching or listening. And again, my information on how to contact me will be in the show notes.
Woohoo!